The first snow came early that year. It fell in slow, heavy flakes over the Badlands, veiling the jagged rocks in a hush of white. The wind, always restless in these parts, howled down from the mountains as if mourning something too old to name. And down at the edge of a barely there settlement, nestled beside a frozen river and framed by the bones of cottonwood trees, stood a trading post, timber-worn and stubborn against the cold. That was where Clara May turned up, a battered suitcase in hand and eyes that held too many goodbyes. She had been sent away from her sister's home in Kansas after her brother-in-law lost patience. "You bring ghosts with you, Clara," he had said, tossing her a train ticket west. "Maybe the wilderness has room for one more." Clara had no husband, not anymore. He died in a house fire while she was out buying bread. No children, no home that wanted her back. The job offer at the post had come from a distant cousin who managed the place, a man she barely remembered, but who'd promised food and a roof. So she came, stepping into the lonely wilderness with frost on her lashes and grief stitched beneath her coat. The post was more than a store. It was a hub between two worlds, settlers trading pelts and flour, Lakota families bartering beadwork and dried buffalo meat. Clara served behind the counter, her hands stiff with cold, as she learned the quiet dance of listening more than talking. And that's when she first saw him. He never gave his name, not then. He came with the others, taller than most, his braids tied back with strips of red cloth. He never looked at her directly. Only once did their eyes meet, hers trembling, his steady like the earth beneath snow. But something in his gaze pulled her breath away, not in fear, in recognition. Clara had always believed the prairie to be a place of silence, but the trading post changed that. Out here, even silence had a voice. It creaked in the wood of the roof during cold mornings. It spoke through the low rumble of buffalo hooves far in the distance. It hummed in the crackle of firewood and the rustle of heavy coats brushing past each other in the cramped quarters of the post. And among the quiet, there was him. He didn't speak the first 2 weeks, not to her at least, but she noticed the way he always arrived after sundown, how he never haggled like the others, how his presence shifted the mood of the room, like someone had placed a feather on a scale already tipped by something heavier. The Lakota warrior didn't wear war paint. He didn't brandish weapons. He came in quietly, moved with purpose, and left the same way. But Clara felt something ripple in her every time he did. It wasn't the first time she'd seen a Lakota man, but it was the first time one looked at her not with suspicion or distance, but with something else, something heavier. It wasn't a smile. It was a pause, a gaze held a second too long. And once, when she spilled beans across the counter and muttered an apology under her breath, his voice broke through the air like the first crack of spring thaw. "You don't have to rush." Just 5 words, but they sat in her chest for hours after. His name, she learned from an elder trader, was Sowan. His name meant South Wind, a scout and hunter. Quiet even among his own people, moved like a shadow, spoke like a poem. She laughed at herself for feeling so stirred by a man who barely spoke. She'd had suitors back in Ohio, boys with fine collars and memorized compliments, but none had made her heart slow and speed up at the same time like Sowan did, just by existing across the room. It was a cold evening when the distance between them finally shortened. A blizzard had been rolling in since morning. The post was quiet,
The other workers had left early, riding out toward nearby ranches. Clara stayed behind, tending the fire, organizing canned goods in rows so neat her late mother would have approved. And then the door opened, snow swirling in behind a familiar silhouette. Soan. He stood dripping at the threshold, wind-bitten but calm, holding a wrapped bundle in his arms. Something red soaked through the cloth. "It's a fox," he said simply. "Wounded." Clara opened her mouth to answer, but her voice didn't come. Instead, she nodded and led him to the stove. They worked together without speaking, her finding scraps of linen, him setting the little creature near the fire. His fingers were firm but gentle. When he unwrapped the fox's leg, she winced at the sight. Bloody, torn. Yet Soan only muttered softly in Lakota, as if the words were not for her, but for the creature itself. "You talk to animals?" she asked, unsure if it was rude. He looked at her, and for the first time his eyes truly smiled. "Even when they need to know they're not alone." Her breath caught. It wasn't the words, it was the way he said them, like he meant them for her. They sat on opposite sides of the stove as the storm howled outside, the injured fox curled between them. In the space of those few hours, the silence wasn't silence anymore. It was something warm, something fragile and growing. She didn't know then that this night would become the line between before and after, that her heart had already taken a step down a path the world would not understand. But she saw it in his eyes when he looked at her, not the way a man looked at a woman, but the way a soul recognized something long lost and longed for. And when she asked, "Will the fox live?" he answered not just about the animal. "Yes, if it's brave."
It wasn't love. Not yet. At least, not the kind people could name. But something had shifted after that storm. Soan returned more often now. Not every day, but enough that others noticed. He never overstayed, never touched her, never crossed a line. Yet his presence lingered long after he left, like smoke clinging to her apron, like the warmth of a fire long gone cold. And Clara, for all her caution, began to wait for him without realizing she was waiting. She found herself leaving a bit more stew on the stove, sweeping the wooden floor twice instead of once, fixing her hair, then letting it fall loose again. Her body remembered something her mind hadn't allowed itself to speak: hope. But in towns like this, hope had enemies, and they wore human faces. It began with a look, then a whisper. A ranch hand came in one afternoon, eyes glinting like something mean behind glass. "Careful, Miss Clara. You keep talking to that Lakota, folks'll think you're turning Injun too." Her cheeks burned, not from shame, but fury. But she didn't speak. She just kept stacking canned peaches like nothing had been said. She knew better than to feed fire with breath. Still, she felt the shift. The next day, a churchwoman offered Clara a second-hand shawl to remind her who she was. A preacher's wife smiled a little too tight when she refused it. The post manager, Mr. Tilley, who had once praised Clara for her bookkeeping, now rarely looked her in the eye. And Soan noticed. "You walk like your shadow got heavier," he said one night. She turned to him, fingers tight around the handle of the kettle. "Maybe it has." He didn't press, just sipped his tea, then said, "You don't have to carry their voices." "I know," she whispered, but her voice cracked. That night, long after he left, she sat by the window and watched the prairie stretch into blackness, so vast, so cold, so unforgiving. Yet somewhere out there,
He was moving under those same stars, breathing the same wind, carrying the same ache. It was the fox that brought him back again. Clara had kept the little creature after it healed. It followed her like a shadow, slept in a crate by the fire. But a few days after the whispers began, she found the crate open and empty. She searched all morning, calling through the frost. It was Sowen who brought it back. He cradled the creature in his arms like a child, its fur matted, one paw bloodied again from a trap. "No animal wanders far when it knows where it's safe," he said. And he looked at her. The silence between them grew thick, not awkward, just full. "I don't want you to stop coming," she said, before fear could steal the words. "Even if they talk, even if they glare." Sowen's eyes, dark as wet bark, softened. "They only see your skin," he said. "I see your fire." She blinked. "You hardly know me," he said. "I've watched your silence. It's louder than most men's words." And she knew then that this was no passing interest, no prairie loneliness, no idle affection sparked by shared space. What tethered them now had roots, but roots in this land could be ripped out by wind and man alike.
Snow returned, with a silence too deep to be peaceful, and with it, the town turned colder than the wind. It started with the ledger. Mr. Tilley called Clara into the back office one morning. His mouth was tight. His fingers drummed on the desk like he'd already decided what the truth was before asking. "There's a miscalculation in the records," he said. Clara blinked. "Where?" He shoved the book forward. Page 14, a receipt from a shipment 2 weeks back. She scanned the lines. It was off, but not by her hand. She hadn't handled that entry. She knew it. But when she looked up, his eyes were already full of suspicion. "You've been distracted lately, Miss Clara. Noticed you talking to a lot of strange company." And there it was. Not about numbers, not really. She straightened her shoulders. "If you're accusing me of something, say it plain." Tilley's jaw flexed. "I'm saying folks are starting to wonder if your loyalties lie more with the savages than your own." She felt heat bloom behind her ribs. "Because I let a man speak to me with decency?" He leaned in, quiet and venomous. "Because you don't know your place." Clara left without answering. She didn't cry, not yet. Not even when she reached her cabin, lit the stove, and sat there long after the kettle screamed. She didn't cry until Sowen came. He knocked twice, soft, and stepped inside without waiting. He saw her face red from firelight and fury, and didn't ask questions. Just crouched by the hearth and warmed his hands, waiting. And when she spoke, she spilled everything. Every word Mr. Tilley said, every glance she'd endured, every night she'd spent wondering if staying in this town meant giving up a piece of herself. When she finished, Sowen's voice was steady. "Then leave it behind." She turned to him. "Leave?" He nodded. "Come north, with me." The fire popped. The wind outside howled. Inside, a hush settled like falling ash. "You want me to run away?" "No," he met her eyes. "I want you to run toward something." She wanted to say yes. God, how she wanted it. But her thoughts spun. "Do your people even want me there?" He smiled gently. My sister already made a coat for you." That made her laugh through her tears, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in weeks. But the moment didn't last, because by morning, the trading post had burned, gone to ash before sunrise. No one was hurt, but everyone had theories, and none were kind. Some said a candle tipped. Others claimed someone left the stove door open. But Clara knew the look in Mr. Tilley's eyes when he saw her standing by the ashes. He didn't accuse her out loud. He didn't have to. She was already guilty in their minds, of loving wrong, of being seen with a Lakota. The townspeople whispered louder now. Some didn't even whisper. A child threw a stone at her horse's hooves. A man spat near her boots. And still, Soan came. "Not yet," she whispered to him. "Not like this. If we go now, they win." He looked at her, patient as stone. "Then I will wait." And he did. For days, weeks. He brought meat when the snow came too heavy to ride, left firewood at her door without knocking, sat with her in silence when her hands shook and her voice broke, until one night they found a symbol carved into her door, a cross, but not one of mercy. This one was jagged, crude, meant to mark her as tainted. And that was the night Clara chose. She did not pack everything, just her coat, the locket from her mother, and a ribbon she used to wear before the world became cruel. She lit one last fire in the hearth, let it warm the room until it flickered low. Then she stepped outside, into the snow, into the dark. And there he was, waiting at the edge of the pines, horse already saddled, torch lit like a star in the black. She walked to him without speaking. He handed her a blanket, then helped her mount. And together they rode north, into a world that had no names for what they were yet, only the quiet truth of their choosing. The cold deepened as they rode, but Clara did not feel it, not in the way she used to. Soan's presence beside her, quiet, steady, unfaltering, was warmer than fire. And for the first time in months, the wind didn't howl like something was being torn away. It whispered instead, like it had secrets it was finally ready to share. It took them 3 nights to reach his people. 3 days of moving through the wilderness, rivers rimmed in frost, elk tracks pressed into the snow, and birds circling high in white skies. Clara didn't ask where they were going. She trusted him. More than that, she belonged even before she arrived. The Lakota camp rose slowly from the trees like something ancient and alive. Smoke curled from lodges. Children darted between the tents in deerskin, their laughter high and wild. A woman with braided gray hair watched them approach, with arms folded, eyes sharp as the edge of a blade. Clara's chest tightened. Soan slowed his horse, then reached up for her hand, not like someone helping a stranger, but like he was claiming her, in full view of all. She slid from the saddle and stood beside him, boots crunching in snow. No one smiled. Not yet. But no one turned their backs either. And then the elder woman stepped forward. She spoke Lakota, fast and clipped. Soan responded in kind, quiet but firm. Clara didn't understand the words, but she understood tone, and that one belonged to family, not fury. The elder looked Clara over, then, without warning, reached forward and brushed a strand of hair behind Clara's ear. And with that,
The whole camp exhaled. A space was made for her. That night they sat by the central fire. Sowen's sister offered Clara a bowl of stew so rich it made her eyes water. Children sat nearby, staring at her with open curiosity, but no malice. No one asked what had happened back in town. They didn't need to. Pain left its own scent, and Clara wore it plainly. Sowen sat beside her, his shoulder against hers. He didn't speak much, even here, but his silence no longer felt distant. It was full, rooted, a silence that let the world settle into place. Weeks passed.
She learned to dry meat, to mend hides, to braid rope from horsehair. She learned that not all silence meant judgment, and not all stares meant hate. Sowen taught her to read the trees, to know which ones held snow the longest, and where rabbits burrowed when the wind turned. His sister taught her to laugh again, sudden and unafraid. And the elder woman, the one with eyes like flint, taught her how to carry herself, with pride, with dignity, with history at her back. Spring came early that year, and with it, word from a trader who passed north about the town Clara left behind. The trading post had reopened. Mr. Tilley was gone, left under mysterious circumstances, some said. No one had been charged for the fire, and no one talked much about the girl who disappeared. Clara listened, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't her anymore. One morning, when the snow was just a whisper on the hills and the earth began to breathe green again, Sowen led her up a ridge that overlooked the valley. They stood together, wind in their hair, the sky wide and blue as forever. He took something from his coat pocket, a bundle wrapped in soft leather. She opened it slowly. Inside was a necklace, carved from antler, simple but careful, and a piece of parchment folded once. She read the single line, written in his hand, Wiakingyan. It meant, shelter from the storm. "That's what I called you the day I saw you," he said. She turned to him, stunned. He stepped closer. "You came into a place that had no room for you, and you made it quieter, kinder, stronger." Her hands trembled as she put the necklace on. And when he took her hand in his, there was no ceremony, no firework. Just breath, just stillness, just the quiet thunder of two people choosing each other when no one else would. They didn't ride away into the sunset. They stayed, built a home with their hands and their habits. They welcomed those who had been lost or left behind. They raised food and fire and laughter. Years later, travelers would pass through the Lakota camp and ask about the pale-skinned woman with the proud eyes and gentle hands, and someone would always smile and answer, "She came from the trading post, but she never left." Because when a man names you shelter, and you decide to believe him, you don't have to leave anymore. You become the place people come home to.